All right, we're recording this is the KubeBuilder controller runtime and controller tools meeting for, what day is it today? July 16th, 2020. As a reminder, this is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube, so don't say anything you don't want recorded for all posterity. All right, so looks like we have a few things on the agenda for today. Let's get started with the first one. Looks like it's about the fake client. Is whoever added that on the call? Does anybody know? Doesn't.
No, but I think maybe what the person wants. I think it's possible to discuss. Anyway, what do you think?
I mean, I'm not. Like, I'm not sure what they wanted to discuss here. I'll have to follow up with them afterwards.
I think some people would like not to deprecate the fake client. But it's not to choose one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we already agreed that we were gonna undeprecate it and add a set of known limitations, and there doesn't seem to be any discussion on the PR, so I'm not sure why it's in the meeting notes. Was my only.
Yeah, I was curious if he's reach a consensus already. Nice to know. Really, thank you.
Yeah, I think we had discussed that in previous meetings and on one of the issues, I think. So, yeah.
I put it there. Sorry, I put it on the meeting notes just so that we talked about it in case there was not enough discussion on the PR. Apologize, I did that earlier.
Okay, yeah, no worries. We just weren't sure what it was. Cool. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss on it, or?
No, I think I'm good. I just need to make sure that it gets in, I guess, right? Like we need to. I need to know what next steps are in case there are any. So.
What the next steps are?
Yeah.
So we could. I think it just needs a review. It looks like it's had. Vince has given it a look. It looks like. So I think it just probably needs someone to approve it. I can try to take a look maybe a little bit later today or next week, depending on my review bandwidth, unless one of the other reviewers gets a chance first. Probably as per like normal Kubernetes, the best way is usually to add someone as an assignee. And it looks like Vince is already assignee, so yeah.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
It looks like you have the next entry as well.
Yeah, the follow-up was a design type proposal to for a way to inject errors so that we could test. I think I put a little bit of pseudocode in the in the design proposal. So, just if you wanted to test your handled versus unhandled error cases in your controller's reconcile logic, this could be a good use case for injecting errors into the fake client, and so that it returns them back for testing. Again, I just put it in there in the meeting agenda to talk about it in case there wasn't enough discussion, but I didn't get the issue. I didn't get the proposal open early enough anyway, so I just opened it yesterday, I think.
Okay. So I think the main thing that I'd like to see here is a wrap, probably just at a glance. I haven't had a chance to look at this in any particular detail yet. But at a glance, the main thing that I'd like to see is a little bit more structure from like the action resource type tuple. I've definitely seen that kind of thing get messed up a lot with the equivalent functionality in core Kubernetes, where people like inverted action and resource type. I think I did that once actually, a piece of code, and I've seen other tests do it as well. So if we could figure out, I'm assuming resource type is just the resource string.
Yeah, it's like a get, a get for a pod with this name and namespace key.
Yeah, so I'd like to see like, instead of using resource type as a string, pass in the object like we do in the normal client, or pass in the type like we do in the normal client, or something like that. I think that would make this more in line with the way controller runtime tends to work.
Yeah, I thought about that as well late yesterday. I was like, well, if a map could have a key, as a struct could be a key for the map, so maybe just a struct would be better. So I can reword that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. That's my main concern. I don't know. Does anybody have anything else? All right. If not, folks can read it offline as well and add comments, etc. Okay, so it looks like the next entry is from Joe. Joe, do you want to take it away?
Sure. So this came up a little bit last meeting, but so I wanted to get your take on this. So in the SDK, for a while, we've had this separate metric server running that has its own separate informer that is basically just like watching for create or delete events on CRs and then creating metrics for those. And what we've been doing now is we just have like a simple like gauge vec, and we set it to 1 when there's a CR available, and we delete the thing when the CR goes away. So you basically have this way of looking at like how many you can kind of do metering kind of things with this. So what I was wondering, and we were starting to look at like, can we improve this at all, is can we make a handler support one of these metrics instead, so that we're not starting up a separate informer, and we're not running a separate server, and we're basically kind of just hooking into something that already exists, and you don't have to worry about all the informer scope concerns and all this other stuff that kind of happens when you run a separate informer. So I've got this branch. I haven't created a PR yet, but I've got this branch that basically adds a enable resource metric Boolean value to the in-queue request for object handler. And then if it's defaulted to false, but if you set it to true, then it starts basically populating a new metric for every CR that comes in with the creation timestamp. And you get like group version kind, name and namespace labels. And you basically get the same thing that we've been doing in Operator SDK, but it's probably a lot more performant and a lot easier to set up. There's less overhead and thinking involved on someone who wants to use it. So I'm curious what you think about this, and if you think it's something that makes sense to put in Q request for object, or whether we should wrap in Q request for object and make our own handler that's called like instrumented in Q request for object, and we can just use it outside of controller runtime.
I think my gut feeling is I'm a little hesitant to include this just because it is kind of it's a little bit of a weird metric because it's along the lines of cube state metrics, I guess. It's
exactly, yeah.
In that it has unbound labels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm a little hesitant to include this in controller runtime. I'd be curious if anyone else on the call is like super interested in this, like, but my initial reaction is probably just to say, yeah, wrap and for your cases.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fine. I just wanted to talk about upstreaming it if it was something that we wanted, and if not, then we're totally fine keeping it out. All right, well, I guess that's all I had there.
All right, and looks like we have two more around Zap.
Yes, I'm Bharti. I just added those 2 points to talk about the PRs that are open for Zap log level, one of them, and the other one was for a new flag called Zap time encoder. So the time encoder PR has been open for a while, and I remember you had a question on the flag the last time on the PR, and we did address that, so wanted to check if you had any other concerns in moving forward with that. And as far as the Zap log level goes, we wanted to know if you had any opinions on that. So if you can just give a review on that, you or anybody from the community, and just to hear some more thoughts. Just want to get a little traction on those 2 PRs.
Yeah, so just a general note, usually the best way to get my attention on a particular PR or to get someone's attention is to assign it to me. I have like a filter in my notifications that specifically adds priority to things that are assigned to me and waiting for approval.
Okay.
So there's that's usually the best way. Just, and as this is just like a general call out to anyone that's listening. So the Kubernetes CI robot will like suggest approvers and reviewers in like the little comment it leaves. And we actually, at this point, we tried to keep our list of potential reviewers and approvers up to date and stuff like that. So the person it suggests is probably a good initial bet. You know, occasionally we'll have to reassign things, or people will come in and be like, oh, this other person is probably more qualified, but that's probably a good initial bet. So if something's like sitting there, yeah, either try making sure it's assigned, or ping someone in Slack as well. Okay, so Specifically, I don't think I've seen this PR yet for the log levels.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard for me to do a review for that now. But it's on my radar now, and I'll make sure I'm assigned so I can take a look later. I was
Sure. Thank you. So as you have suggested, I'm going to go ahead and assign them so that it'll be there on your list.
Okay. And as for the time PR, the time encoder, I think I'm not sure if this was clear from my comments. I find this flag to be a little bit strange. And I'd like to avoid having like 30 Zap flags out of the box or whatever. And I find this one to be like kind of weird, oddly specific. I think I hadn't seen your most recent update on it yet.
Okay, I mean, yes, I mean, after your comment, I don't think I've made any changes, but yeah, that was about it. Adding a time encoder flag to make sure the operator developers can specify, a specific time encoding to their encoder, because we are already giving options on what kind of encoder that you can add using command line flags, whether JSON or console or anything else. So that being said, if you also provide a time encoder, it just makes user experience easier. That's what my opinion is on that. But yeah, if you think that that's pretty specific, and if anybody has any other comments on that, I can take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear if anyone has comments here. For anyone that hasn't read the PR, basically, it's a command line flag to allow changing the timestamp format. If that wasn't obvious, does anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Just for some context, I put a comment in here. In SDK, we added this because at least one of our users was like, hey, I'd really like to be able to set this as a flag rather than hard coding it in my operator. So it seemed like there were cases where, for some reason, and I agree, Sally, this does seem a little weird, but it seemed like there were use cases where for some reason an operator developer would want to give the admins running their operator the ability to decide which time format to use. So this is one of the things that we added in SDK to support that use case. And again, this is just one of those things, trying to be good stewards. So if we're kind of duplicating things in SDK that are mostly already supported in controller runtime, if it's something that seems like it could be more generally useful for more operator developers, we're just trying to have these conversations to bring these things upstream so that we're not, forcing people to choose between, well, do I use controller runtime or do I use operator SDK? Do I have to use both? Those kind of questions that always seem to come up. But again, like if we decide we don't want this flag in controller runtime, I think it's fairly simple for us to implement this flag kind of separately and then incorporate it into the existing controller runtime Go API, although I haven't actually looked to see how doable that is. That might actually, maybe that's one of the reasons it's potentially hard to do that, because of the way that we set up the encoders and the way that Zap works. So you have to, so controller runtime sets up the encoder, and you have to define the time encoder before you set up the encoder. So you have to somehow inject the time encoding into controller runtime's APIs to be able to set it by the time controller runtime creates the encoder. I know that's really convoluted and strange if you haven't actually been looking at the code, but it's a little bit painful because of the way that Zap is set up.
So that's, at the very least, that's something that I think we should probably look towards fixing, because like at the very least, I think that shouldn't be hard, right? Like it it should be quote unquote easy for you to do this out of tree. I yeah. In as for the as for the flag itself, I mean, it's just mostly that I don't want to have like a bajillion flags,
which is fair.
which just ends up getting super confusing. So the other thing is I clicked through to the linked PR, and it looked like the comment was largely just even in debug mode, the timestamps are hard to read in debug mode. So like with the quote unquote human readable output, the timestamps are hard to read. So we could also consider changing like the default timestamp format when you are in debug mode as well. But I think that's a separate discussion. I guess if you've had a bunch of folks asking for this, I think we can probably, I guess we can consider adding it.
Maybe what we could do, like as an initial thing, would be, so the way this PR is set up right now is we add some new options to the zap.options struct that would enable callers and users of the struct to set up these options, and they're generic. It's just encoder options. So it's not specific to the time format, the things that are exposed in the option struct. So what we could do is basically have this PR just have the updates to the options struct that supports generic encoder options, and then also obviously update like the add defaults function to handle those things, such that when it creates the encoder, it honors the options that are configured in the options. And then out of tree, then we could add that flag and have it tweak this option struct, and then we're kind of where both of us seem like we want to be potentially.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely fine with that approach.
Cool, let's do that. And then if there's a lot of interest for the flag, then we'll open another PR that adds the flag upstream. But right now, like we've had that downstream. I don't know how many people have been using it. We haven't gotten that many questions about it, so it's hard to know how popular or not that would be. Okay, does that sound all right with you, Bharti?
Yeah. So I'm gonna make a note of that in the PR and either make changes or close this one and come back with another one. Yeah.
Okay, and then I had one more thing that I remembered I submitted last week. This Boolean predicate functions. So right now in controller runtime, when you're setting up watches, if you pass multiple predicates, they're all ANDed together. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. So what that means is that if someone has a more complex predicate logic that involves anything other than just ANDing a bunch of stuff together, then they have to write their own predicate. So what I was thinking is it might be nice if we had this AND and OR composite predicate where you basically a Boolean, right? So it'll loop through all the predicates that are passed to it and apply whatever Boolean function it is. And then you can obviously chain these together in basically an arbitrary Boolean logic function. So the idea is we could more easily support kind of building block predicates rather than monolithic predicates.
Yeah, I think that probably seems reasonable. It's a little bit of a shame that it's a pain to create your own predicate like that. Like, yeah, I think this seems fine. I
think I remember actually writing something just like this, like early on when the predicates were first developed, and then just not submitting the PR because I think it was just like another review to get done or something. But like, I think it's always kind of made sense.
yeah, no, I think I agree that it makes sense. I was just trying to also additionally think of a way that we could maybe make predicates a little bit easier to compose by hand as well, so that the right, because like the equivalent, like, quote unquote obvious Go code seems like it should be just like to be able to pass a function that just ORs them together, but like since it's a big interface, you can't do that at the moment. But yeah, I'm fine with this. I think this is fine.
Yeah, for the easy composition, I can add that in at least 2 downstream projects, we basically have built helper that makes it easier to write predicates. So you don't have to have a dedicated function for create, update, delete, but can just pass in one and be done. So apart from the current PR, that would be another good change, I guess, to actually upstream that work.
Yeah, I think I would definitely. Can someone actually? Does anyone mind filing that issue? Like, we should have a trivial predicate that's like, or a simple predicate, or like, I don't know. Someone can come up with a good name for it, but like that's basically just a predicate that uses the same logic across all 4 functions. That seems like it would be a good intro. Like good first issue, and should be pretty easy to implement, and would probably also help with a lot of the predicates. And based on what Alvaro said, there's at least a couple of projects that already have something like this. Do you say?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that seems like a good candidate for something for us to add as well, in addition to this PR.
Sounds good. I can create an issue.
All right. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add? All right. If not, I'll see y'all in a couple weeks.
See you. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, Sally.
See y'all.